And back to our coverage of the signing into law of the new minimum wage bill, which is now an act. I'm joined by CEO of the CFG Advisory and an economist, Tilewa Adebajo. Mr. Adebajo, thank you for joining us on the news tonight. It's now law that the Nigerian worker can't take less than 70,000 naira. Talk to us about how much impact you see that having economically, for the Nigerian people.
Well, it's a good step in the right direction that you have agreed to a minimum wage. But what is going to be obvious is the fact that not every state or not every company can pay this amount of money. And I think that is where the flexibility needs to be applied. But having said that, I think now that an agreement has been reached, it's now a question of how to implement it. And I think it's also important that this should not cause a deception in the marketplace that people now have more money and people are looking to see if there's going to be an inflationary impact to this development, which should not be, because obviously some of these workers can barely afford many things in this country. So I think while it is important, then it's also a question of affordability. Because one of the things you don't want to force people to do is to lay off people so that they can afford to pay some of these wages. But yes, I think it's been signed into law, and I think then I think we should move away from this and let's focus on the more important issues, which is to bring down inflation, to grow the economy, and to get this economy out of stagflation. Because without controlling inflation, we continue to erode our purchasing power. So I think that is the priority of the government, and government itself should go and check its spending. Government spending is excessive. We have a supplementary budget of 6.3 trillion, which is to be approved, and we have about 19 trillion of a deficit which needs to be financed, which also includes this 70,000 naira minimum wage from the government that also needs to be funded between now and the end of the year.
I'm just wondering how optimistic you are about the implementation of this new minimum wage, saying how long it took the subnationals to catch up with the previous amount.
Well, like this is what I've said. You see, this is a gradual. It's not the federal government can afford it. And the government has, like you said, passed a budget to cover its own portion of the supplementary bill. That's what part of the 6.2 trillion supplementary budget is for, is to be able to provide for the minimum wage. But every subnational will have to look at its own budget and decide what sort of increase they can make. And every company, private, will also look at that and see what they can do.
Talk to us about the immediate and long-term implications of selling crude oil, the crude to Dangote refinery in Naira, an update that we just got today from the Federal Economic Council.
Well, that is not news, to be honest with you, because for years, the NNPC has sold crude to its own refineries in Naira. And there is a 450,000 barrel provision for crude oil a day that is reserved for local production. So the question is that if we have 4 Maribound refineries in Nigeria today, where has the 450,000 barrels of crude oil meant for local refineries been going to? So I think it's a brilliant step in government's direction to divert this to not only Dangote refinery, but all the Nigerian refineries using Dangote as a pilot. So let's understand that it's not just only for Dangote, but it's for all the refineries that will come to Nigeria. So if other refineries come up, then they have to get a share of this. So it's a step in the right direction. And by agreeing on an exchange rate with Dangote and selling him this crude oil in Naira, then government is able to hold Dangote's feet to the fire to be able to understand what the cost of the premium spirits will be, or the products. So at the end of the day, since you are paying for your crude in Naira, we can expect our products at a particular price. So for the first time, we're going to see some transparency in the pricing of crude oil. And I believe this is a fantastic step from government. It will help them with the subsidy removal and be able to help government balance its budgets and manage its deficits. So I think, without a doubt, it's a step in the right direction. But it's not news. It's always been a practice in Nigeria. And I think I'm happy that the government has continued practice. And so now we all need to hold the Dangote refinery accountable. Indeed. But I think one more thing I want to say before we close out, government also needs to go a step further. A lot of all these JV arrangements we have with our crude oil contracts, production sharing contracts, and JV oil contracts, government needs to sell down between 10 to 20% of their holdings. If they do so, government can raise an additional $10 billion, which can help with balancing the books and easing the pressure on government financing.
All right.
This is a priority.
Well, I guess we have to go now. Government is promising stability in fuel prices, less pressure on the naira, and a lot of billions have been made, from importing fuel. We're going to see how that plays out in the coming days. Economist, CEO, CFG Advisory, Taiwo Adebajo, thank you so much for talking to us on the news tonight.
Good evening. Thank you.